morning. Not very many of you today. I was struggling with the time change, right? It was brutal this morning. My kids were like, it's too early. I agree, but we have to get up anyway. Anyway, best day ever for me yesterday. Tom Brady, do you hear? He unretired. Oh my gosh, I lost my mind yesterday. There were 2 cakes. We had like this big party. We had 2 cakes and Brady unretired. That was like the best Sunday of my life. Right? I was so happy. It was like these giant cakes, and then I got this news, and I was with all my friends and Brady. So I'm like, hope he doesn't get hurt, but he's back 1 more year. We'll see. Anyway, if he doesn't like re-retire tomorrow, I don't know what he's doing. But anyway, I updated your exam scores this morning. So if you were waiting for them, I was just waiting for the week to close out. But I put your exam scores into Canvas today. So just a couple of like stats. Oh, I knew over here you're installing. But the average for this test was a little lower than the last one, 86.2. Doesn't surprise me. Sometimes the learning unit, because there's so much terminology in it, can be a little bit more challenging, I think, than the first chapters. But the average is right around 86. The high score was 100%. There were two people who got 100%. So that was exciting to see. A couple of people did really well. The low score was a 52%. So definitely a little bit of a range, right? But for the most part, a lot of people did really well. And I'll encourage you, just like I did with the first exam, we start another unit today. So we have this unit and we have one more. So continue to use it as like a learning opportunity. If you wish you had done a little bit better, right? Maybe study a little bit differently for the next one. But a lot of you, I would imagine, are feeling pretty good about how you did. You can pat yourself on the back. But if you wish you had done a little better, maybe prepare a little differently. And I'd be happy to meet with you if you ever want to talk about it more, like what could I do differently. But for the most part, if you're preparing that study guide, it should be pretty clear. So again, I posted those grades this morning. This unit that we're on, we will look at motivation, emotion, human development, and personality. And then we have spring break kind of sandwiched in there as well. It's coming. What is it? Like 2 weeks? It's coming this week and next week, and then we get a break. So it's definitely coming soon. Any questions or thoughts or anything with this before we move forward? Oh. Okay. Feels weird that there are so few of you today. Like, I mean, I guess I should never complain. One of my colleagues has 3 students, like 3 on a good day. I'm like, can you imagine one of them sick? 2 of you, 1 person in class, I just sit next to you, right? I don't know, that'd be weird. So I should be grateful. We have like 20 something. So yeah, it's just been such a weird year. And then my kids today, they don't have to wear masks anymore. So they were like running around like no masks and free. And I'm like, sure, rub it in. It's like, we have to wear masks through the end of the semester, even though like the whole state has stopped. So I don't know, hopefully they'll change that. Maybe not. We'll go with it. Yeah. Yeah, but they're voting on it, so it's tricky. There's like all these different levels to it. There's definitely a lot of people who want to change it. Yeah.
They gave us a sheet that we have to sign, that we get the option.
Yeah.
But we also have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of things like that they're trying to figure out, and then like certain venues, like it'll be okay, and others it might not. Like it's, I don't know, we'll see what happens, right? But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that's being voted on a lot. I keep getting emails about it. Like every other day, there's an update on thoughts, not an update on policy, just on what they're thinking. All right, so we'll start chapter 9 today. We're going to look at motivation. What is it that motivates us to do things? So we'll look at some different theories of motivation. I love this. What do you think? Should we get started on that motivation research or not? But it can be really hard to find the motivation to do things, especially if it's not something that you're, super interested in or something that you enjoy doing. But we'll talk about some of those different theories and then a couple of specific motives like hunger and the need to belong and motivation at work. So probably take us about a day and a half, and then we move on to the next topic, which is very connected, and that's emotions. But if we look at the word motivation, it comes from the word motive. And I don't know about you, but the second I hear the word motivation, I think of like inspirational posters that you'd find in like a career office or like a college center, where it would say stuff like, determine, achieve, challenge, all those kind of buzzwords that go with being motivated. So I had to put them on here. But a motive is any kind of specific need or desire that's going to prompt goal-directed behavior. Now, motives can be super basic. It could be I'm hungry, or I'm thirsty, or I'm tired. It could be something very like physical in that nature. And then your goal-directed behavior might be to go to sleep, or to drink something to wake yourself up, or eat something so you're not hungry anymore. And it can also get really lofty. It could be achievement, wanting to achieve a goal, wanting to get a degree, wanting to get a good job, right? Find social connections, right? It can be something really big or something really small. And so that's why we have so many different theories for this. We can talk about different ways that we're motivated and different theories that prompt different types of behaviors. Now, I thought as a way to start this, I had somebody share this with me like 2 years ago, maybe. It's this little motivational video about this little boy. And it's got some sports in it, which is kind of fun. But he's this little guy and he's so motivated, right? And he has just such a drive for life. And I think it's kind of a cool way to look at like the idea of motivation. There's so many great like motivational videos on YouTube, but what I love about this one is it's just a story of this little guy and what pushes him and what drives him. And so I will play it for you. Let me pause this. I love it because I think it's just really cool to see his energy, right? It talks about an energy and a zeal and like a passion for life. Like we could reframe that, as he has a lot of motivation, right? He has a lot of drive and like a lot of that push. And that's really what we'll talk about from here. Where does that energy come from? Where does that drive or motivation or push come from? Lots of different theories, of course. Psychology is all about all the theories. We have so many of them for everything. But I love it. Again, these words definitely go with motivation, right? Challenging yourself, being determined, pushing yourself to achieve, or just, being prompted toward a behavior, right? And that's the essence behind motivation that we'll go through. He always makes me feel lazy though, right? Like I look at him, he's so driven and like so like good at everything he does, right? Like makes me feel like I should try harder. But we'll talk about again some of these different theories that tend to go with this, and we're going to start really basic. Right, this first theory really covers things that are very like simple needs that we have, simple motives. And from this first one, we talk about what we call drives, right? A drive is any kind of state of tension or arousal that's going to motivate behavior. And you'll notice this a couple of times in this chapter. We use the word arousal, and we don't necessarily mean like sexual arousal, right? But more like physiologically aroused, like you're fight or flight, your sympathetic nervous system is kicked into gear. So more that you have a level of like alertness or arousal. It could obviously be the other as well, but that tends to be how we mean it. And you'll see that word come up a lot in the different theories. But from this perspective, you have a state of tension, right? You're hungry. That'd be a state of tension. Your body's out of balance because you're hungry. Or you're thirsty, right? Again, you feel that state of tension, you're out of balance because you're thirsty, or you're tired. Right? It's something tending to be relatively like biological and relatively basic. And from this perspective, when you feel that state of tension, you are driven to reduce that tension. And so we call it the drive reduction theory, right? That you are motivated to return your body back to like balance or homeostasis. So if you're thirsty, you get something to drink, and then you're back to like neutral. Hungry, you eat something, back to neutral. Tired, you go to sleep, ideally, right? And then you're back to neutral, or maybe you drink something to help you like wake up. But from this perspective, again, we tend to be looking at things that are very basic, right? That you feel that state of tension in your body. And so you're motivated to get rid of it and get yourself back to like a neutral level of balance. So obviously this doesn't account for a lot of different things that motivate us, but it does account pretty well for like basic kind of physiological things. So more theories. This one specifically is called the arousal theory. So this one says that we're all motivated by seeking an optimal level of arousal. Now, there's two different parts to this. There's kind of an optimal level of arousal or alertness for any given activity, right? Like take the moment that you're in right now. there's an optimal level of like alertness or awakeness or arousal for this class, right? Like if you are here, you're kind of screwed, right? Like your whole motivation is going to be just trying to stay awake, right? You'll do the head nod thing. Everything that about you is just trying to stay awake. Because you won't be able to pay attention and function and take notes and all that kind of stuff. If you're on the top, if you had like 16 cups of coffee before you came here, or like 2 monster drinks or whatever, right? You might not be able to focus because you're so agitated and alert and up. So there's kind of like that level in between the two pictures where you're awake enough to sit and pay attention and take notes, and you're not fighting the urge to fall asleep, but you're not so awake and alert and aroused that you can't function and pay attention. So that's the first part of this, is that we tend to seek an optimal level of arousal or alertness or awakeness for any given task that we're doing. The other part of this is that each one of us tends to have like a level of arousal or awakeness or like energy that we are motivated to maintain, right? If you're a very like driven, always moving, always going, fast-paced person, you tend to be motivated to maintain that and be that way. And it might be really hard for you when things are slow, right? If you're a very slow and mellow person, you're motivated to maintain that. If you like to just chill and relax, then you're going to want to do that. You're going to be motivated to be that way. And when people are moving really quickly and it's like a fast-paced environment, it might be difficult for you. So kind of two pieces to this one again, that you're motivated to find the optimal level for any given task. And you're motivated to also find like the optimal level for what's comfortable for you. And some people are more flexible with that. Like for me, like it depends on the situation, but other people tend to be just like more mellow or more like hard driven and like more energetic in general. A couple more. This one talks about whether we are motivated from within or from outside of us. A really, really big theory of motivation, whether it is intrinsic or extrinsic. And intrinsic comes from within, that helps you remember it. When something is intrinsically motivated, you do it because you enjoy doing the behavior, right? You read because you like to read. You play fantasy football because you enjoy fantasy football. That's me. Still so excited. I gotta let it go, but I'm still very excited. So you do something because you enjoy the behavior itself. Extrinsic means that you do it because you want to earn a reward or avoid a punishment. So like fantasy football, for example, for me, I love doing it. It's just like something that I absolutely enjoy, but I also want the trophy, which is in my office downstairs, by the way. I'm holding it though. Sadly, it's not mine, but I am holding it for the winner. Kind of sad, but I'm like, I just pretend it's mine. I put a little post-it note over his name, right? Or maybe for the money, right? Because I often win money playing fantasy football. Or think about your job. If you like your job, if you actually like what you do, then you're intrinsically motivated to go to work. But you might also be extrinsically motivated because you want a paycheck, right? There's nothing wrong with having both. In fact, when you have both, you tend to be more successful. Right? Think of a class that you're in. If you really like the topic, or you really like the class, or maybe like the structure of it or whatever, it's easier to go to that class than when you don't like, right? But you might go no matter what because you don't want to miss points, or you don't want like your grade to suffer. So there tend to be like a combination of the two, right? Whenever we can combine them, we tend to be more successful. But in general, right, we do things that we enjoy, right, because we enjoy them. And that's more of like an intrinsic motivation. Versus if we're doing it for like a paycheck or a reward or to avoid a punishment, that would be extrinsic. And I love this, a candy joke, right? After a student eats the candy, does that make it intrinsic, right? Not really. But you might eat candy because you enjoy eating candy, which would make it an intrinsic motivator. Another one, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is a controversial but popular idea. I'm going to draw this pyramid up here, triangle up here. Abraham Maslow is a very famous humanistic psychologist. He talked a lot about like the goodness in people and us striving to realize our potential in life, very like kind of lofty ideas. But he's really well known for this idea of the hierarchy of needs, that we're motivated by like very basic stuff. And once we've met the basic stuff, we can kind of move up the hierarchy, move up the ladder. So at the bottom of this pyramid, you have physiological needs. Now notice it's not psychological. Inevitably, somebody will put that on like the next test, but it's physiological needs, right? Food, water, sleep, basic stuff that you can't live without, right? If you go a certain amount of time without eating or drinking or sleeping, it could kill you, right? Those are very like core physiological needs that we all need to maintain. So he said we're motivated to meet these first, and then after that, we can kind of move on to higher level needs. But first we have to meet these very basic ones. After that, he said we would move on to safety. Having some sense of like a schedule or normalcy, security, maybe it's having like a roof over your head, like feeling safe and secure in your life. After that, we could go to belonging and love. Having meaningful relationships with other people, right? So Maslow would argue that it's hard to have a meaningful relationship with somebody if you're starving and you haven't slept and you haven't met those basic needs, right? And that's obviously, as I said, a little bit controversial. A lot of people in different countries are starving, don't have like a roof over their head, and they still have meaningful relationships and accomplish things in their life. But something that he believed to be true for most people. After that, we go to esteem. Feeling a sense of like accomplishment or achievement, right? Competence, going to college, right, would be fulfilling your esteem needs, right? Feeling good about yourself, trying to accomplish goals, feel educated or achieve goals that you have for yourself. And then at the very top, he called this self-actualization. It's kind of like the old army slogan of be all you can be, right? It's realizing your potential as a person, achieving your fullest potential. And he said a lot of people don't ever get here, right? A lot of people live their whole life struggling with these things down here. And so they can't reach self-actualization. But when you do, that it's this feeling of like accomplishment and kind of reaching that top of the pyramid, fulfilling your life goals and your life aspirations. Yeah.
When people get to that point,
Yeah.
sometimes they're like, no, sort of
Sure.
like they are rich or famous or they accomplished the Olympics or something.
Yeah.
Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
When we like pull them down.
Sure. Yeah. So you could be here. You could be here, right? And then something happens, or you still feel like you haven't gotten there. Maybe you still don't feel like you've accomplished this, right? And so it knocks you back down. Or maybe someone never gets here because they feel that way, right? They don't feel, even though they've won, like you said, the Olympics, like even though you've won the gold medal, you still don't feel like you've done enough. Even though you've won 7 Super Bowls, you still don't feel like you've done enough, right? And so you have to go and continue. He would say if you felt that way, then you haven't actually reached self-actualization, that you're still kind of right here in that esteem need. But yeah, people can kind of go up and down throughout their life, right? And even throughout a day. So it's kind of a constant movement. It's not like once you get here, you're done. That's a great point, right? That people kind of can start back over, kind of get kicked down the ladder. And how other people view your accomplishments might be very different than how you view them as well. Any other questions or thoughts or comments or anything? I found a really cool picture once, but I couldn't find it again. It was like the hierarchy of needs of dessert. And I was like, oh, that would have been a good one. It was like cake at the bottom, have to fulfill the cake first, and then you can move up to cookies and cupcakes. So I'll have to see if I can find it. It was funny, but this is definitely a really popular idea, even though, as I said, it's a little bit controversial, right? Because it doesn't tend to fit for everybody. Oh, there it is. I found this one though. It was close. I forgot I put that on here. My kids found this one. My daughter was all like, social media should be at the top. And I was like, well, no, technically it's like the third one. One last group of theories here, instinct and psychoanalytic theories. And these ones are much older. These are like older theories that kind of were some of the earlier ones to be proposed. Instinct theory says we're all born with instincts about basic things, like how to survive and so on. We'll talk about reflexes when we get to human development, but we're all born with some like innate or inborn knowledge on how to survive. Very basic, super basic, but we know to cry when we need something as babies. We cry when we're hungry, we cry when we need attention. It's like the earliest form of communication that we have, like we cry, it's very automatic. And then what happens afterwards starts to shape our responses and our tendency to cry in the future. But we're born with that tendency. A lot of people talk about survival instincts, right? That you're born with a like an inborn knowledge of how to survive, an inborn drive to live and survive. Or like paternal or maternal instincts. You've ever heard somebody like talk about that? Like, oh, I just knew how to be a mom, right? Or how to be a dad. Like it was just inborn and natural. We do tend to come equipped with some instincts. So they're very hard to identify and study because it's hard to know, like, did you actually have that inborn or was it taught to you at some point? All right, but there are thought to be some instincts, that things that are very instinctual or natural that we don't have to be taught. Freud built on that a little bit. He talked about that we are all born with two different basic drives, right over here. Eros is our drive toward like life or pleasure. And Thanatos is death and aggression. Freud, things we'll talk more about him in like a week or so. Very like kind of pessimistic in his theories, right? But he said that we're all born with Eros and Thanatos in place. And then we spend our whole life trying to balance our life and death drives or our pleasure and aggressive drives, that they could get a little bit out of control. People could go too far in one direction or another. But that we spend our whole life trying to balance these two drives and not be taken over by like the death and aggression side, but live more in like the life and love and that side of it. So it's interesting, this idea of like instincts, as I said, it was kind of one of the first theories, but it's largely been moved on from just because they're very difficult to actually like concretely identify and study. But there is a lot of agreement that we're born with things like maternal and paternal instincts, survival instincts, and things like that. So as is the case with everything in psychology, it's probably some combination of all of these theories that explain why we do the things that we do, right? Certain theories explain certain things better than others. And together, right, they kind of capture that complexity of the things that push us or motivate us to do whatever behavior we're doing. But I have a little review for you that I made of this. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you go through, I have 10 little scenarios and they're really brief. And then at the top, I have all the different theories that we've covered. What I want you to do is to get in here to like 2 or 3, like whatever's easy and convenient. And for each one, you're going to decide which theory that we just talked about fits the little scenario best. Now, there are 1 or 2 of them where you can make a case for a couple, but most of them have like a best answer. So be thinking about which theory, that's all you need to write, and then why, and we'll talk about it together. And make sure you put all your names at the top because you are going to turn it into me for participation points. So find a person or 2, and then send someone up to come grab one. And I'll give you a little bit of time, and then we'll talk about it together. But like 2, 3 people, whatever's easy. And again, make sure you put your first and last names up at the top.
Yeah.
Nice start, my daughter. Oh, really? Oh, that's very nice.
There it is. Okay. Well, oh, it's the black cloud is in the bottom.
That one is like two. That one's the most open. Perfect complex. You can make a case for a couple of hundred.
Yeah. Safe job. Yeah, you locked me out.
Yeah, number 6 is the most open to interpretation, right? If I look on there that like is right to make money, then it's not what you're doing for 2 life. But I think it's become. A local level of thought. Yeah, that would be.
The reason I didn't read it.
Or extras.
We'll see.
You could, it's part of this Johnson, like it's part of that theory for all about instinct. So I can see the one that is, I think for the broad. Yeah. So most of you are more than half done. Let's take you for 5 more minutes and then we can talk about it. A lot of you are on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says in Word.
Maybe like. It's not saying what they're doing. We go to bed and then they'll go yeah. Yeah. It's good. Oh, yeah. I think it's not for. Yeah.
We're gonna go over it, but I make sure your names are on there. Perfect.
You know what? It's straight right now. My friends are like, they're
I think you're on. But you're on the right track, but that was better.
I feel like we're on.
No, so driver definitely didn't drive. But you mentioned you're on it. Yeah. But I think to do something a little bit. That was then the third, chapter 30.
For me,
Oh, okay, yeah. No, okay. I don't know. I was in.
yeah. And he also starts to get. We go sorry. All the way. Yeah. Yeah. This is a perfect. Yeah.
We'll talk together. 1 more minute.
Maybe it's like right before a weekend.
It's the whole week, yeah. So it's that whole last week of the month. Yeah, for the first time in 5 years, mine's the same as my kids, but you never. Yeah, they're never the same. It's frustrating. For the first time, we all have the same month. Yeah, this is what happened from like the other colleges, from the other schools.
Oh, yeah. Bro, sorry.
All right, is everybody done? Anybody need? Okay.
Okay, so I get you very good. Yeah, jump. Yeah.
From you, and then wandering around, most of you have, I think when we get to the next exam, you'll have a bunch of multiple choice. A bunch of multiple choice that are kind of like this, but these are always obviously like very simplistic, and so, but I think a lot of you did a beautiful job of identifying what fit best. So let's go through them. Anyone willing to take number 1? What do you think is going on with G? Yeah. We're very excited for that one. I like it. Oh, no, just your answer. You don't. Okay, and why'd you go with that one?
Oh, because she pulled her sweater, so we thought like that was something. And she was cold, so like it's
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, she's cold, which creates a state of tension, right? Puts on a sweater, now it's kind of like neutral and balanced, right? Again, drive reduction is almost always like basic biological stuff, right? Very like kind of basic level stuff. How about Frank, number 2? You want to take Frank? Yeah, thank you.
It says that this is the arousal because he's trying to reach the optimal level of arousal for his class.
Yeah, I think that fits the best, right? Like he drinks something to help him wake up so that he is kind of alert enough to pay attention. I think that works really well. How about number 3 with Leah? You want to take number 3? See if anyone else, because we have like 7 more, so if you think you're willing to do one, yeah. Yes. Yep, right. She writes because she enjoys writing, right? Is motivated by the behavior itself. How about Mike, who on the other hand, a little bit different, yeah.
He said extrinsic because he is only concerned about how much money he gets and how much attention he'll get from
Yeah.
practicing medicine.
Yeah, it'd be one thing if Mike was like, oh, I want to be a doctor because I really enjoy being a doctor, that'd be intrinsic, but he just wants the money and the prestige, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But it's a different type of motivation. Perfect. How about Connie on the back, number 5? You willing to take number 5? Yeah, thank you.
He's higher up than-
Okay.
Because she wanted to find a job and a place to live
Yeah.
before anything else.
Yeah, right. I'm kind of worrying. I got to worry about this before I can worry about that. Right? Moving up that hierarchy. Wonderful. Number 6. Number 6 is the most open to interpretation of all of them. I think there are 3 like really reasonable responses. Anyone want to give me one that you put for number 6? You want to have one theory or thought for that one? Yeah. Okay. So like instinct theory. Mhm. Okay, yeah, and I think you can definitely go for like your spread or like instinct or psychoanalytic. I think just instinct in general might be a little like safer, but that idea like that it's like an instinctual behavior to do. Anyone want to give me a different one? Anyone put something else? I could think of at least 2 more that might work there. Yeah.
Drive? Is that right? Or was that like?
If you took it from the if you were the baby, right? Like if you took it from the baby's perspective,
Yeah.
like crying, that would work. But I think we're focusing on more like the mom, but from the baby side, that would be like the baby cries, maybe the baby's hungry, or instinct theory.
That's why we put it.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Sure. I think intrinsic or extrinsic would be the other 2, right? Intrinsic, maybe the mom is doing it just because she enjoys doing that. I enjoy caring for that, or that child for that baby, or extrinsic so that she can go to sleep, right? Like I'm going to take care of the baby so I can get some sleep, right? So not so much because I want to, but because I'm tired and want to go back to bed. How about number 7, Marco? You're just a few more. Anyone willing to take number 7? Yeah, thanks.
Extrinsic motivation,
Mhm.
because he wants the external reward.
Yeah, right. $20 for every A. Right? Is that good or bad? I don't know. Do people get money? I got ice cream for A's, so I was motivated by ice cream. But $20 per A. Does anyone get like money for grades? As a kid, not anymore. You're like it stopped, right? My parents stop in high school too. It's like, come on, the college pretty strong one, right? Like, don't. Yeah, but I think more for this. I should get more ice cream, right? But when you get older, then you can take yourself out for ice cream. Or when you don't do this, isn't it? No. That's right. I'll take my kids out for ice cream. I love it. Yeah, but extrinsic, right? He's getting money for every grade. That's perfect. How about number 8? Yeah. Okay, you're gonna go with intrinsic, so yeah, number 8. Okay. Okay, I think there's one that fits a little better. It's an I one, like we're close.
Oh,
You just read it wrong. Perfect. So you had it. I knew you had it. For instant theory, right? The baby, you talked about babies being born with that instinct. So it's Monday, right? It's Monday. How about number 9 with Carlos? 2 more. Anyone want to do number 9 yet?
We said intrinsic because he wants to do the crossword and enjoys doing it, which is the time help him do it.
Perfect. Yeah, right. He enjoys doing them, so he does that, right? Intrinsically motivated. How about Luca and Jack, number 10? Anyone willing to finish it up for us? Yeah.
Arousal theory.
Okay. Why'd you put that?
It's like what they would rather be doing.
Yeah.
Lugo wants to sit on the couch and Jack wants to go out and have fun.
Yeah. Right. So they're motivated to maintain that level of arousal. There's one other one that fits really well. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, they're doing the things that they enjoy doing. So I think you could make a case for either of those. And again, rarely as people are we that simple, where it's like just one thing. But I think you can see how each theory kind of captures a slightly different element, of what it is that motivates us. All together, again, they tend to be the best, explanation. But make sure all of your names are on there. If you want to pass those up, I'll come and grab them from you. Thank you. You better. Thank you. All right, thank you so much. All right. Cool. All right, so a couple more things. Let's do a couple more slides and then we can call it a day. We'll talk about a couple of different motives, right, that we tend to have. And I went into this a little bit more in the book, different motives that we are motivated by. But one of the biggest motives is hunger, right? And if you read any like intro psych textbook, there's often a lot of discussion about the motivation or motive of hunger. And there's a big difference between being biologically and physically hungry versus being more like psychologically hungry or like wanting food, right? They can be very, very different things, right? Oftentimes we eat for a variety of reasons, right? Maybe you're eating because you're stressed or you're bored, or you're like, I'm not super hungry, but I should eat because it's lunchtime, right? There's a lot of reasons that we eat. I was super full yesterday and I didn't care. I kept eating cake because it was there, right? I wasn't hungry, but it was there. I wasn't going to let it go to waste. I mean, I bought it. I might as well eat it, right? Like a few people didn't show up and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to do my part. And I need a little bit more. We eat for a lot of reasons, right? And so there can be very biologically driven reasons, right? And there can be a little bit more psychological factors. And so the motive of hunger plays a big role. Think how often we are hungry, right? How often we have to eat. We have to eat in order to survive, but it can get a little bit complicated, right? We do have structures in our body that monitors the different blood sugar levels and different chemicals in our body that indicate hunger. But again, psychological and environmental factors tend to be just as important, if not more, in deciding when we eat, how much we eat, and what we eat and all that kind of stuff. So a little bit of a combination of both biological and psychological. And I think where you see the psychological factors the most prominent are when you get things like eating disorders, right? And eating disorders are examples of the psychological stuff overwhelming the biological stuff, right? So maybe you eat despite the fact that you're incredibly full. Right? Or you eat to the point of being uncomfortably full and then you get rid of that food. Or you ignore the fact that you're hungry and you don't eat because you don't want to gain weight, right? These are examples of psychological factors really overwhelming the biological or physical ones. And these are the two most common. There's one more eating disorder, but these are the two big ones, anorexia and bulimia, right? And with anorexia, what we see is that people tend to really deprive themselves of eating, right? They tend to be underweight and not want to eat out of fear of gaining weight. Like, I can't eat that, it'll make me gain weight, right? And so somebody with anorexia tends to be very underweight, very thin, and they have a very distorted body image and a fear of gaining weight, so they don't tend to eat a lot of food. Bulimia, on the other hand, people tend to binge and purge, right? So they eat way too much in what we would call a binge episode, right? And then find a way to compensate for that and get rid of it, right? And a little bit of all these behaviors is really common, right? A lot of people have complicated relationships with food. And so you might binge occasionally, right? And I'm sure most of you have maybe even binged or eaten so much that you made yourself sick. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have an eating disorder. But when people are doing these things repeatedly, and it starts to interfere with your life or the way that you view yourself or your self-esteem related to weight, that's when we start to look at things like anorexia and bulimia, when they become very like repetitive and like kind of commonly occurring in your life, but a little bit different, right? One tends to be restricted eating and like a fear of gaining weight. And this one is more like binging, eating a massive amount of food and then doing something to get rid of that food, like vomiting or taking laxatives or exercising or something to that degree.
Reading that, like purging could also be like not eating for a while as well. Does that also count?
It could be, right? It's not the most traditional like method, but it can be, right? Maybe you ate way too much yesterday, and so you decide today I'm not going to eat, right? So the technical term for these behaviors are called compensatory behaviors or compensating for eating. So that could be one. It's not the most common, but it definitely does happen. And sometimes people show a little bit of both. That happens with disorders as well, where people can have a little bit of a presentation of both sides. Yeah. It depends on the motivation and the frequency, right? Like most of us have probably fasted, right, at some point, right? Maybe it's for blood work or it's for like a specific reason. If you're doing it for like a short-term reason like that, I wouldn't say it's problematic. But if you're constantly fasting and depriving yourself of food and it's like a very repetitive behavior, maybe, right? But some people go on like cleanses or fasts every now and then just to kind of for like a very specific reason. I don't know. Do you want to say more or was it more like no, right? But it depends, right? The tricky thing with food and eating is it's almost never black and white, right? Like the boxer or the wrestler who gains weight or loses weight to stay in a class, or the dancer, right? Is it an eating disorder or is it circumstantial? It could be maybe on the road to one, but an isolated behavior we wouldn't label that way. Yeah.
I think last year I went through the loss. And like I was like really stressed and I was really anxious. And so like I wasn't exactly starved myself. My body just didn't want to eat whenever I ate something. Like I didn't get the same pleasure. Sure. Like it felt gross. And so like for the next 2 weeks I just like I couldn't really eat anything. I would drop 10 pounds. Because that I was really it's or something that was it could be I couldn't find out. I was wondering why.
Sure. And I'm sorry that you had something really like traumatic, right? It's hard when we have things happen to us. It affects us emotionally, right? And those emotions can affect us physically. Sometimes when people are grieving or they've experienced a loss or they're depressed in some way, it affects their hunger. Right? One really common symptom of depression is sometimes people stop eating altogether. It doesn't have the pleasure or the like pull that it did anymore. They don't enjoy food. They always don't care enough to eat because they're just so consumed with grief or with anguish or depressions. And so it's more that, that has kind of taken over precedence over them, right? Or maybe you're just so tired and so unmotivated to eat because you're hurting, right? Very, very common that people, when they experience either grief or loss or depression, that it affects your hunger levels. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that we all possess. And it's thought to play a really big role in how much pleasure you get from things, even like from eating food or from just activities that you would normally do. Serotonin plays a big role in that. So more than the cortisol, which is a common stress hormone, I would say it's probably serotonin or dopamine, which gives us pleasure from things that we enjoy as well. But really common. I mean, if you have something hard happen in your life, then it might completely affect how interested you are in eating. Other things too, I mean, if you've lost we talked a little bit about losing like your sense of smell, right? Like maybe if you lost your sense of smell and food doesn't taste good anymore, you might not want to eat it as much. It doesn't necessarily mean like an eating disorder as much as it might be more like circumstance. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts or comments or anything? Okay. Let's see. I have, maybe we could stop. Let's do one more slide and then we'll stop after this one. So on the flip side of that, so we'll talk a little bit about weight loss next time, right? Very common that people at some point in their life are either trying to lose weight or gain weight. Incredibly common. Most people at some point are trying to do one of the other. But obesity, on like the flip side of eating disorders, tends to be a huge health problem in our country, right? And much more so than even other countries, where it's an excess of body fat in relation to lean body mass, right? And the way that we tend to calculate this is with a numerical indicator called your BMI, or body mass index. Totally not a perfect number by any like stretch, right? This number is often used very out of context, but it is something that we can tend to use to predict your disease risk, your overall health status, a little bit of like body mass structure. Has anyone in here ever had your BMI calculated? There's a couple of different ways you can do it. Anyone remember how, or comments or anything?
It's like your weight and your height, right?
That's part of it, right? But then they also tend to do a couple of other things as well. Yeah.
Weight, I include like our urine test.
Okay. Interesting. So for you, it was both and then that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot, I know how small it's overweight. I've been at what I am before for the last months, and I still consider it overweight. I feel like in my not the best way to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that body fat or mass and mass.
Yeah. And like, that's what I said, it's definitely not like perfect. It's kind of always been the standby, but I'm not sure that it is like, there are other things that are starting to replace it and looking at just different percentages, but it's still used a lot. I mean, you can have this done, there's like a little, it's almost like a video game controller that you hold and it measures like the amount of like muscle mass that you have. I've had it done the old fashioned way where they take the little thing and they pinch the fat in different spots of your body, which is always real like comforting, right? I volunteered 3 years ago. Not 2 because we weren't here. It's like 3 or 4 years ago. We have like student trainers and they always need volunteers. And so they encourage faculty to volunteer. And I went down, they're like, we're gonna have to calculate your BMI. I was like squeezing my stomach and my arms and my legs. I'm like, this was a nice thing to do today, right? It's not the like funnest thing to have done, but it tends to give you a number, and then you can use that number to see like, where do I fall in relation to others? The idea is that it gives us like a standardized comparison, but it's definitely not perfect because it doesn't take a lot of things into account. Like we have different bone densities, we have different like our height and our weight, our age, all these factors. But we do still tend to use this, even though it's not perfect, to determine if someone is overweight or obese or underweight, and so on. So it's something you might see a doctor use or someone at a gym use relatively commonly. Right. And again, a little bit of an issue, right? We tend to have this weird split right now where we have more and more people developing eating disorders and then more and more people developing obesity. It's almost like the middle shrunk a little bit and there's a lot of extremes. And so what we'll do next time, we'll talk about the other side of it, losing weight and fad diets and some of those other things, and then the other motives. And then once we wrap up this chapter next time, we'll also move on to the next chapter, chapter 10. So we'll stop here for today. If I don't have your sheet for some reason, make sure I do have it, but we'll wrap up there. Make sure you sign in, and then I will see you all on Wednesday. Please try, there was a lot of people who were late today. I'm so glad you did come, but please try and see if you can get here on time next time so you don't miss out on stuff. I talked about the exam and all that at the beginning, but otherwise I'll see you all on Wednesday.